Drake drops a massive block of ice in the middle of Toronto. Not a metaphor. An actual, physical, enormous block of ice, sitting right there in the street. And hidden somewhere inside that thing is the release date for his new album. Fans showed up with blowtorches, with hammers. A Twitch streamer eventually found a blue bag frozen inside. Inside that bag, a blurry Drake selfie, some jewelry, concept art with phrases like DRAKEISICMAN, FREEZETHEWRLD, and SAVEOURCLUBS. That is not a normal album rollout. That is a man who has been sitting on something for a long time, and he wants you to feel that pressure before you even press play. And once that date dropped, hip-hop media went into a full frenzy. Nobody more than Joe Budden. Now look, Joe Budden has had a complicated relationship with Drake. These two have gone back and forth publicly more times than most people can count. Budden has criticized Drake. Drake has clapped back at Budden in his music. There is real history there. So when Joe Budden sits down on his podcast and says he is genuinely excited about ICEMAN, that means something.
And when he get finished playing with bad,
that is not a small thing. And what specifically got Joe hyped? One name. During a recent episode of the podcast, the crew got into a full discussion about ICEMAN and whether the album would live up to all the noise surrounding it. Then Budden dropped something that shifted the entire conversation. He said he was hearing that 40 is back. And not just back in passing, back on this project. His words were something like, "That gives me a different level of anticipation and excitement, because I am a fan of what they do together." Now, for anyone who might not fully know who 40 is, let's take a second here. Noah. 40 Inch's Shebib is arguably the most important producer in Drake's entire career. He is the man behind Take Care. Nothing was the same. If you're reading this, it's too late. The moody, atmospheric, late-night sound that made Drake feel different from every other rapper out at that time, a huge portion of that is 40's fingerprints. These two grew up together in Toronto. 40 has been publicly battling multiple sclerosis for years, and despite that, he kept showing up in Drake's corner. That loyalty runs deep. But lately, people noticed that 40 seemed less present in Drake's more recent work. The sound shifted. The production felt different. A lot of people felt it even if they couldn't fully name why. So when Budden hears that 40 might be back for ICEMAN, he is not just excited about a producer returning. He is excited about a whole era of Drake returning. Budden went on to say that Drake has recently picked up a lot of fans of whatever he has been doing outside of 40. But with 40 coming back, he thinks Drake steps up to the plate and does what he is actually supposed to do. And then he said something that cuts right to the heart of what a lot of people are quietly thinking about this album. He said he would be genuinely disappointed if whatever they hear on ICEMAN sounds like something they have already heard, because Drake has been through something he has never been through before. Think about what that means. Drake just survived one of the most public and brutal rap battles in the history of hip-hop. The Kendrick Lamar situation was not just a diss track exchange. Cracked something open. It forced people to look at Drake differently. It should have forced Drake to look at himself differently too. And one of the previewed tracks already gives you a glimpse of that. Drake rapped. And this line hit people. "It's still heartbreak, Drake, but I glued it together." That line alone tells you exactly what headspace he is in going into this album. Raw, aware, scarred, but standing. If 40 is truly back, and the chemistry between them is what it has always been, ICEMAN has the potential to be something real, not just commercially successful, emotionally necessary. The kind of album that lands differently when you listen to it alone at night? That is what those two built together before. And the possibility that they are building it again is what has Joe genuinely locked in. Then something interesting happened after all of this excitement started spreading. Drake's own fans came for Joe Budden. Yes, you read that right. Once word got around that Budden was hyped about the rollout and speaking positively about ICEMAN, a section of Drake's most loyal supporters started pushing back, hard. Their argument was essentially this: Joe sided with Kendrick. Joe was against Drake when it mattered. So Joe does not get to celebrate ICEMAN now. You pick a side. You stay on it. And Budden addressed it directly on his podcast. He called out the fans who were gatekeeping the album, policing who was allowed to be excited about it, who was allowed to speak positively on it. His co-host jumped in too, and the whole crew went back and forth on this "stay on that side" argument that some of Drake's supporters were running with. The conclusion they landed on was that these overzealous listeners care more about the narrative than they do about the actual music. And honestly, that is the correct read. Think about what these fans are actually demanding. They are not asking for loyalty to Drake. They are asking for loyalty to a storyline, a fixed position. They want commentators to freeze their opinion in 2024 and never update it regardless of what happens. That is not criticism. That is a performance. The whole point of being a legitimate voice in this space is that you call it like you see it every single time. If Drake was on the losing end of things during the Kendrick battle, you say that. If Drake comes back with something that sounds incredible, you say that too. Changing your assessment based on new information is not a betrayal. It is literally just being honest. There is also a deeper irony here that nobody is really talking about. Drake's whole Iceman concept is built around being cold, unbothered, above the noise. The image he is crafting is one of a man who has risen past the chaos, and his own fan base is out here creating new chaos by turning the rollout into a loyalty test. That is working against the very energy Drake is trying to build around this project. Joe said what needed to be said, and the fact that he said it knowing it would get him more criticism from that same section of fans, that actually takes a certain level of nerve. Now here's the question that the entire hip-hop internet has been circling around since Iceman was first announced. Should Drake go back at Kendrick Lamar on this album? This is not a simple yes or no. This is a layered conversation, and the podcast tackled it head-on. The discussion started when Budden joked about the hypothetical idea of Kendrick somehow stepping on the Iceman release period, and that joke opened the door to a real debate. Should Drake directly address the battle on this album? Should he name names? Should he throw shots? Or should he just let the music speak? The group overall landed on the side of Drake probably should not go directly at Kendrick again, and the reasoning behind that makes a lot of sense when you think about it strategically. If Drake dedicates bars on his 9th studio album to a beef he already fought once and lost the public perception battle on, what does that communicate? It says he is still stuck. It says Kendrick is still living in his head, and the single worst thing you can do after losing a public battle is prove you are still losing sleep over it 2 years later. Iceman as a concept is supposed to represent being cold, unbothered, frozen in your own lane. You do not diss someone to look cold. You move quietly, you drop something undeniable, and you let the body of work make the statement for you. That is the Iceman move. That is the smart play. Then there is the other side of this, and this is where it gets real. Drake has never been the type to play things safe when he is fired up. The concept art that surfaced from the Toronto ICE installation included a sketch of Pinocchio locked inside a set of crosshairs. Pinocchio, the character known specifically for lying. That image circulated fast. People decoded it immediately. Is that aimed at Kendrick? At Pusha T? At someone else entirely? The art was deliberately vague, and that vagueness is part of the strategy. And beyond that, Budden himself went on record saying he genuinely wants to hear a J. Cole diss on the album. He thinks it is coming with an 80% probability. He pointed to Cole's time playing basketball overseas and basically said, "Distance does not make you untouchable. Drake's not about to mention you in a favorable light just because you stepped away from rap for a while." Some of the other co-hosts disagreed. They felt like even if there are references, they will be subliminal rather than direct. But everyone agreed on one thing. There is almost no version of Iceman that does not at least allude to everything Drake went through over the past couple of years. That is the realistic expectation, not necessarily a full-blown diss track with names screamed into the microphone, but bars where you stop mid-listen and go, wait, was that about who I think it was about? Those moments are what make an album feel alive. Those are the moments fans replay 100 times trying to decode every layer. And Drake has always been exceptional at writing those kinds of lines. The debate on the podcast is less about whether the beef gets addressed and more about how. Does Drake do it with elegance, buried in metaphor, wrapped in melody, letting people do the work of decoding it, or does he throw the direct punch? That choice is going to define a significant part of how ICEMAN lands. Now let's rewind to before any of this, before the May 15th date was confirmed, before the ice sculpture, before the release date buzz, because there was another rumor swirling around ICEMAN that was getting a lot of attention earlier. Drake and Future. The two have deep history. What a time to be alive. Jumpman. Years of chemistry and collaboration. But at some point, the relationship seemed to cool publicly. Future made comments. Things felt different between them. So naturally, when rumors started circulating that they might be squashing whatever issues existed, and that a collab could land on ICEMAN, the internet ran with it immediately. Joe Budden's response? A shrug. His position was basically, the Drake and Future reunion narrative does not interest me. I do not care about the reconciliation storyline. I care about whether the music is good. And at the time, he was also skeptical that the album was even close to dropping. He said something along the lines of, with each passing month, he thinks Drake is going to keep stalling people. The pod even floated the possibility that it might not come out at all that year. That skepticism was before the confirmed May 15th date, of course. But the broader point holds. There is a moment in every big album rollout where the pre-release drama, the rumors, the speculation, all of it starts to become its own separate event. And that event can start to swallow the music whole. You spend so much time talking about what the album might be that when the actual album arrives, people almost do not know how to hear it fresh anymore. They are listening for confirmation of theories rather than actually receiving the music. Drake is one of the only artists on the planet where the rollout itself becomes a cultural moment independent of the songs. The ice block in Toronto was not just a promotional stunt. It was a news cycle. It was trending for days. It generated content and conversation for weeks before a single new second of music dropped. That is a level of star power that almost nobody else in music has right now. But that star power also comes with an enormous amount of pressure. Because once May 15th actually arrives, once the album is sitting in people's ears in real time, none of the drama matters anymore. The ice melts. And what you are left with is a body of work sitting in front of millions of people who have had months to build up expectations. Every rumor they heard, every theory they ran with, every piece of concept art they decoded, all of that becomes the measuring stick. And Budden's final word on all of it was clear. He put it plainly. If this Drake album comes out sounding like what he knows it has the potential to sound like, he will be the first one on his show to give it every bit of credit it deserves. He will big up Drake's process. He will acknowledge the comeback. He will call it great if it is great. That is a man who is not performing for anybody. He is not trying to appease Drake's fans. He is not trying to stay consistent with what he said 2 years ago during the battle. He is just watching the situation with open eyes and calling it straight. And when you think about it, that is exactly what hip-hop commentary is supposed to be.